Welcome back to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. My name is Frank, and I'm glad that you're here today. Dell is out on assignment, but here we have up in Baltimore. Well, my name is Frank. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin currently. Up in Baltimore, Maryland, we got Jeffrey Simpson.
Hey, everyone.
Down in, is it Clearwater today or is it Safety Harbor?
It is a Clearwater day, Clearwater, Florida.
Down in Clearwater, Florida, with electricity and a stable internet, we got Andrew Larson.
This is why I'm not at church.
And then in Trinity, Florida, near the host site of the Practically Pastoring Conference, we got Timothy Miller.
Hey.
Guys, just want to say at the top, I'm glad you guys are safe. We've been in connection. We've been talking. In the last episode we recorded, we talked about what you guys were doing in preparation of the hurricane. We don't have to dive too much into it. I know you guys have talked about this in the morning after show. And but like overall, you guys are good. Minimal damage to your homes and to your churches. I know Tim's roof is a little rough, but all things considered, it doesn't look like the other homes that we see on the TV. Like the Tropicana field literally doesn't have a roof right now. And there's the tornadoes seem to have wrecked some neighborhoods in a super way. But any quick word from you guys to kind of recap the response from your churches and how you guys are doing?
It's a lot. It's a lot. I don't know how else to describe it. It's unlike anything I've had to experience since taking over as lead pastor at Lakeview. Unique season for sure. A lot of ministry opportunities, which has been awesome. Unfortunately, they've just been really heartbreaking. Just a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of loss. We're used to loss of life, but loss of stuff is just, it's different. It's not loss of life. We're super thankful that it's not loss of life, but it's really hard for people just to jump back and get back to normal when they don't have anything to get back to. So trying to minister in this season has been unique. It's been a challenge. I think a lot of us in the area are just really tired right now, just really tired. So it's been a lot, but thankful that we're able to be here today. I do have a roof over my head. It's half a roof. The other half is a big, giant blue tarp. So hopefully here in the next few months, I'll have a full roof over my head.
Yeah, it's a different kind of grief. It's, like Tim said, it's not loss of life, but it's loss of a whole bunch of stuff. It's just really weird. And like you said, neither of us have news crews camping outside of our homes to be like, hey, look how bad the devastation is. But so there's like a weird amount of survivor's guilt in there as well. Like there's people down the street from me that have 100-year-old giant tree on their house. And what do you do? How do you respond? So it's been an odd season. And thankfully, the Gulf dropped 12 degrees in temperature since this time last week. So hopefully we won't have any more of them.
Well, I'm glad that you guys are okay. I'm glad that you guys are, still rebuilding. It's been really encouraging to see, based on our podcast, the now work that you guys are doing with your community and with your people. And Andrew, has given me a new, with the news we're about to share in a few minutes. If I ever have to, go move out of my space because of a hurricane, I plan on going to Disney World because that seems like such a fun place to be when experiencing a natural disaster.
Oh, it's fantastic because there's nobody there. So, this is kind of inside baseball for Disney people. But at one point, the line for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train was 10 minutes. Peter Pan was walk-on.
Unheard of.
So, I mean, it was a great.
Isn't this like when Ted Cruz went to Mexico during a big storm?
It's a little bit different, I think. But I mean, maybe I didn't fly first class. I drove a minivan. Yeah, like 5 of the 6 elders, including. Hang on, that's bad math. Yeah, 80% of our elders left from our church. So it wasn't like we were all. Everybody else was suffering, and I was at Disney World. Everybody left.
Right. Yeah. It's been wild to watch. I mean, maybe not everybody listening knows, but both Frank and I have pretty close connection to Florida. I grew up in the Newport Richey area. I went to Trinity College. So, seeing the drone footage of, roads that I have driven a lot flooded was crazy. I talked to my pastor from Newport Richey, and he just said it's the worst he's ever been through in terms of a storm like this. And I remember... when my family first moved to Florida, I think a storm had just happened
year or two before that. So people talked about it. And honestly, in all the years living there, we never really experienced a really, really bad storm. It would always hit the Panhandle, or it would hit the island south of Florida, but it never actually like came through. And so it was pretty crazy to see. And one right after the other was pretty nuts too. So,
who I've spoken to, like if you're listening to this or watching this, you've probably been hearing on the news people say like, oh, the hurricane decreased in strength before it hit the land. Like it's not as bad as people were worried about. But the reality is every person I know who lives in Tampa or the surrounding area has said this was the worst and scariest storm they've ever been a part of. Like the thing to understand is like we've talked about this before. It's been over 100 years since Tampa's had a direct hit, and that area of like Central Florida. And this has been like one of the scariest and like most destructive hurricanes that's hit Florida in a long time. So even though like on a national scale, this decreased in power, I mean, it literally ripped the roof off a baseball stadium, and like
I mean, it went from a 4 to a 3. A Category 3 hurricane is not like
still
a little
major.
thunderstorm.
Still major, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know dude, we had the National Guard had to rescue 2 Lakeview families. Like it was wild. I'm sitting outside their neighborhood watching the waters rise, praying that they get out as the National Guard is sending in fleets of troops. And at one point, I watched them drop off a boat because the trucks were too big for infants. So the boat went in to get the infants out. It was so bizarre. And I'm sitting outside the neighborhood like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was wild.
And like 3 million people without power is a crazy number. And and as we're still people without power. And so like, it's nuts. But anyways, thank you guys for serving down there. We're going to talk about Tampa again in a second, and we're excited. Practically Pastoring Conference, February 17th to the 19th in 2025 at Lakeview Church. Guys, I wanted you to share what was something that you walked away with from that last conference that like was like new information or helpful. I'll start. Matt Steen from Chemistry Staffing was there, and he just gave so much like insight when it came to interviewing and like your resume. And like we know that like Delmar changed the trajectory of his career because of that like breakout and because of that time. So was there anything that like you gleaned from either a formal session or from a talk around the table that you like implemented in your church later?
I think for me, there was just a couple of good conversations that led to book recommendations. And I picked up a couple books and was exposed to some new ideas. What's cool, one of the things that I think is cool is that you're, in this kind of setting, you're with people from different traditions, which leads to you like being exposed to authors and ideas that are not part of your little church world. Because it's pretty easy to be kind of in your denominational or even in your kind of movement bubble. And so you might not get exposed to a lot of different thinking. And so I think, if I remember correctly, there was a couple books that I picked up on the issue of women in ministry or in leadership in the church, because that was something that I was reading a lot right then. And there was a couple of book ideas that I don't even remember who, but that shared with me, and I picked those up, and those are really helpful. So stuff like that is probably my favorite part of a conference like this.
During the final session, I remember a certain Reverend Dr. Andrew James Larson in the middle of the people, as he always is, seated, of course, giving his message. Yes. And I just realized in that moment
I don't have the stamina to stand.
It's possible to sit and preach. Thanks for that, Reverend Dr. Andrew James Larson. The community, guys, like you're with your people. Like we're together. We can laugh, we can joke around, we can have some serious moments of conversation. But really, it's about being with some like-minded people, and that's really necessary sometimes.
It was one of the table discussions, and it was like a church administration thing where we were like, hey, what do you use for this? What do you use for this? And it was like, let me email you our new system. And it was just the camaraderie of being with like-minded people. And hey, I also pastor a church about that size. Here's what we're doing, and it's worked. Or, hey, we just did that sermon series. Let me send you some notes that I have on this. So for me, it was the time around the table with the other pastors that made such a huge impact.
That's great. If you want to be at the Practically Pastoring Conference in 2025, go to practicallypastoringconference.com. Registration's open. We want to see you there. All of us are going to be here, including Delmar, including you. You should be there. Bring a friend. It's going to be a great time. practicallypastoringconference.com. All right, guys. We have a special episode. You've probably already seen the title of this episode. I'm planting a church in Central Florida.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. I'm moving back to where I grew up, back to Tampa. Me and my wife are actually packing everything up as we speak, and in about 3 weeks or so, we'll be on the road heading back to Tampa, leaving Milwaukee, and we're planting a church, and we are going to be doing that at and through Lakeview Church, Timothy Miller's church.
Let's go.
And so this is kind of like a surreal thing. I want Jeff and Andrew to kind of take the lead in this episode to kind of ask us questions, but I'll say this in the top end. One thing that Practically Pastoring is all about, and even the conference is all about, is not doing ministry alone, doing ministry with their friends. And one thing that's not like even like the relationship Tim and Andrew have, where they're able to be like in proximity with one another, is such a rare thing in ministry. Like Jeff he stood in my wedding. Like, me and Jeff have known each other for a long time. And outside like a couple instances where we had like one-off moments to do ministry together, we were never really able to like even now we have to do these like video calls to like kind of hang out with each other and share ideas with each other. But the opportunity to work under the same roof with such a close friend like I can with Tim right now is such a rare thing that's not like shocked on me. And so anyways, I'm just excited for that opportunity alone, much more the opportunity to plant a church and what we get to do. So guys, Andrew and Jeff, I would love for you to ask Tim and I questions, because I'm sure people who are hearing this, who may have saw my Facebook post, who may have saw what Tim shared, are like, what the heck just happened? How is Frank moving to Tampa? How are they playing a church? What's going on? Lead us in this discussion.
I'll jump in because I've kind of had I've been backseat of this whole situation, because I've been buddies with Tim for a long time. And when Tim took over as the lead pastor at Lakeview and God began to stir, it was, okay, well, this is not going to be the forever plan for Lakeview. So Tim, why don't you just walk us through what the thought process is at Lakeview? What were kind of the issues that made you guys decide, hey, this is where we want to be going as a church? And just start there and kind of give the brief history, sure. And then why hiring someone to come in and plant a church was the solution, instead of, hey, we'll hire another next gen person or a Thursday night service or whatever else.
Yeah. We, the dream for a potential plant started about maybe 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. We had an elder retreat and did some vision casting, and we were starting to see a little bit of growth at the church. A lot of people moving in the area. So we kind of just started praying through, what are our options? There's a lot of options out there. I'm not saying like the way that we are doing it is the right way, but it is a way, right? Do we want to continue the growth at the campus of Lakeview? If so, then we're going to have to, at some point, probably build a bigger sanctuary or just keep adding more services, which, a lot of people do, and it's not bad or wrong or any way like that. But another option that we started praying about was, what would it look like to plant another church? Not a satellite campus, not a Tim's preaching on a video at another campus. Again, not that those are wrong. It's just, that's just not the direction we felt the Lord leading us. Very early on, we admitted we don't want to be a mega church. I think mega church classification in America is 1,000 people, like over 1,000 people is classified as a mega church. So we decided pretty early on that was not in our DNA. We didn't really sense that's who we were as a church. Part of our DNA is very family oriented, and there are ways to still be a family oriented church as you continue to grow. It just becomes a lot more difficult. The red tape gets there, and you guys have lived in mega church world before, and you've been a part of that. It's not that it's wrong. It's just different. We just kind of sensed that wasn't who we were or where God was calling us or leading us. So we started praying about this idea of what it would look like to potentially plant another church. We weren't quite there yet as far as the growth and the congregation. It was just kind of a pipe dream early on. And then over the last 24 months, really the last 2 years for sure, we just started seeing growth that we'd never seen before. We were able to double, and since then we were able to bring on additional staff. So we did hire a full-time youth guy. Our admin is full-time. We were able to hire some auxiliary staff as well. So we got to this point in 23. We had a vision casting Sunday, 2023. I think it was April of 2023, where we were pretty comfortable going before the congregation, letting them know that it's no secret that we're growing. The plan to add a third service was already starting to get talked about. So we thought, okay, we can let them know that a third service will probably happen within the next year and a half. But longer term plan is to eventually plant a church in the greater Tampa Bay area. We don't have a specific spot picked out just yet, but we'd love to go to a spot where the gospel is needed, where a church is needed. So that was 23. And then at the beginning of 24, which was this year, not only numerically were we where we thought we needed to be, but financially, the Lord just continued to bless us in that way as well. So we made a decision as elders at the beginning of 24 to say, you know what, let's start getting serious about what this could potentially look like to bring on what would be known as a planting pastor, which is kind of unique. It's not something we have ever done before as a church. I don't know a ton of people who have brought on a planting pastor like this and then sent them out. I've known churches who have raised up pastors and sent them out, but to actually have a specific position for planting pastor to come in and to be on staff for a period of time. So Frank and I, we've actually been chatting for a while about the possibility of something like this, never knowing, like, you know how it is, like when you dream with your buddies, you don't know that if it ever could actually happen or not. But as the weeks and months went on, we started to realize that this is like a really serious possibility. So I went to my elders and said, look, that if we're ready, we could potentially start interviewing, going through candidates. I let them know that I had a very serious candidate in mind. I already knew Frank's heart and his passion to plant and to be a lead pastor. So the elders were on board. So that's what kind of led us up to that moment of deciding, yeah, we do want to plant. And again, it's a way, it's not the way, it's a model, it's not the model. We're excited about what this could look like. We're going to be partnering with a church planting organization that's going to help us through all of these things. We're not doing it on an island. I've already talked to several church planters themselves who've gone through different organizations and pros and cons and some things we could do different, better, similar. So I'm excited about this next season. Bringing Frank on board is going to be a lot of fun because he's also going to help in the immediate, because we do have a lot of pastoral needs at the church that there's just too many people for, one or two staff members to be able to handle. So before we send out Frank officially to plant, he's going to be coming on as another pastor at Lakeview. So he's going to be preaching at least once a month. He's going to be helping out with administrative duties. He's going to have staff oversight. So there's a lot of responsibilities that Frank's going to have, and he and I are going to work really closely on. He's also going to be attending elder meetings every month with me, so he can get used to what our elder meetings look like and how we run them. So that way when he does plant, if he chooses a similar elder-led model, that he'd be able to run those meetings accordingly. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm excited. We've been sitting on this for a little bit, so really stoked to be able to actually talk about this finally in public. So it's exciting.
And one more question for Tim, then we'll pass it on to the Frank side of the story. But when you're talking about Frank choosing things, and obviously, we're going to let the Holy Spirit lead where the Holy Spirit leads, but how much of a, hey, this is Lakeview 2.0, and how much of it is, hey, we're going to kind of release Frank to go with how the Holy Spirit leads? How much oversight do you think there's going to be, 2 years from now, when I think the name is frankchurch.com is the name of the church that he's trying to plant? How much oversight do you foresee Lakeview having? You say if the model is the same, and that's a lot of times when someone is being sent out by another church. It's you will do this, 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 and this. So what is the plan as far as Lakeview is concerned on what this relationship looks like 2, 3, 5 years into the future?
Yeah, it's going to be a fully autonomous church. We're going to support them as long as they need our support. And if Frank doesn't have a solid group of elders at the beginning, then we'll be right there with his leadership team, even serving as part of his leadership team to help them get off the ground. I see this very much as a sister church relationship, Andrew, not that different than what you and I already have. And once they're up and off the ground, I don't see why there wouldn't be times where Frank would preach at Lakeview, I would preach over there, and vice versa. So I see this as a partnership, not so much as, we're the ones in charge and then Frank and them are answering to us, but much more as a partnership, sister church relationship. But
so again, not a mothership situation.
Not a mothership, but we will provide resources and oversight as Frank needs until they're able to say, we're good from here, and then the relationship can then be much more like a sister church relationship.
One of the questions I was thinking of when you guys were first talking about this is kind of like, where are you feeling called to plant, or do you even have that in mind yet? I know you said Central Florida, it's a big area. So maybe this is more for Frank than Tim, but kind of both of you just talking to like, what's been the process of dreaming about where we're going to plant and what that's going to look like, for, down the road, because as a church planter, my guess is that you want to plant other churches too. That's usually right in the DNA of it. So just talk about like, is there areas around kind of the area where Lakeview already is that need gospel, preaching churches, or like how are you thinking about that?
One of my insecurities, even going into the idea of like wanting to plant a church and not go like the traditional route, is like, I don't know what I don't know. What I do know is that like I've fallen in love with the beauty and the evangelistic aspects of church planting, and like what it does for a community and what it does for other local churches. And so I've been kind of like almost like pestering Tim, be like, hey, is there anything that is there a place that you're thinking? I even asked him, like, dude, I'm not even on staff yet. And like before I even announced publicly about this, he's given me planning center access. And so I've been able to like download a list of all the addresses of the members and the regular attenders to kind of map out on Google kind of where everyone is, just to see like, is there like a hotspot of place where everyone is that's like maybe 20 minutes away, that's like far enough away where it's like, oh, there seems to be a lot of people coming from I don't know, let's say Clearwater, even though that would be more like Andrew's area, like people are coming from Clearwater, which I don't think is necessarily true, but maybe that's where we should go, right? And so between that list I've made, plus like there's a couple places that I don't necessarily feel like too comfortable sharing right now, because like I don't know if those are the places we're going to go, but there's two places that keep coming in my mind as places where to possibly plant. But I think that like what I would venture to guess, without, and this could completely change, is like it's probably going to be a place within maybe 20 to 25 minutes from Lakeview, where people who are on the launch team from Lakeview Church can reasonably drive to, even if it's just for a year, a commitment, or a 2-year commitment or something. And then like that kind of relationship between Lakeview and this new church plant can really be like a true, like, hey, if I'm sick, an elder from Tim's church could easily drive out to my church and preach. Where like I've been talking to other church planters like Tim has, and I've been hearing about people who their sending church is 3 hours away, and it's literally just like them parachuting into a community with like no real local support except for whatever they raise. And one conviction that I've been having as I've been hearing more from other church planters, and I've been like praying about what this church plant looked like, is Tim's right. I think like not that it's not completely unusual for churches to have a church plant resident in their staff, but what is kind of unusual is I think like planting churches from your church within the community. That's not because of a church split. That's not because of broken relationships. that kind of serves as like this healthy kind of sister churches that's in a non-competitive way in the area. I think that is not common if that's true. So yeah, I mean, Jeff, like there's a couple places I'm thinking. I would say if you were to put a big circle within 30 minutes of Lakeview, I would say somewhere in that region would probably be where the church plant is. But like, I don't know, the Lord might move us, and between Tim and I, and it might be like, hey, we got a plant in Brandon and like something like crazy.
Yeah, my point was like you don't have a specific place in mind, because one of the things that I've noticed with church planting that I kind of don't necessarily agree with is this idea of like somebody being like called to a specific city from like the beginning of their ministry. Like I don't know why it just rubs me the wrong way, but it's like I just feel like my call is to be serving in the church, and wherever that leads me geographically is where it leads me. And maybe I'm wrong for that. Maybe I'm cynical, but I was just kind of wondering, like, did you feel a sense of calling to a specific place, or is it just more like, I think this is where God is and I want to go and see where it leads?
Yeah, it's funny how no one's ever called specifically to Poughkeepsie, you know?
Right.
You know, I'm called to this vibrant and exciting city. It's weird.
Yeah. I do think it's funny because when I announced this on Sunday, I intentionally thought I'm going to mention the name of Tim's church. I'm going to say Lakeview Church. What I didn't expect was that people were literally Googling Lakeview Church while I was on stage. And then afterwards, multiple people came up to me and said, Frank, you said you're planting in Tampa, but this church is in Tarpon Springs. And I was like, well, Tarpon Springs is kind of a misnomer because it's actually closer to Odessa, Newport Richie. And I was like trying to explain, like, this is kind of confusing, especially because Milwaukee, the way the city's laid out, is very different than how Tampa and the surrounding areas are. I will say this is like, I say Central Florida because that's the easiest way to explain where I'm going in the country. And I can also say the greater Tampa Bay area, and people who understand like Chicago kind of understands what I'm saying. Cause like no one actually lives in Chicago. They live in the surrounding areas of Chicago. And I feel like Tampa's becoming like that. Where
Tampa Bay land, like Chicago land.
Exactly. Like there are a lot of churches in Tampa, and there's a lot of good churches doing ministry in Tampa. And like the church I grew up in was was an hour away from, not an hour, like a mile away from Raymond James. Like it was in Tampa. But the realistic thing is like Tim and Andrew can both say their churches are in the Tampa Bay area. And I would argue that like, if I feel like a calling to a region, it would be the Tampa Bay area. Like, I don't think I want to tell Tim, as much as my wife would love for me to say, Tim is going to send me to plant a church in Celebration, Florida. As great as and fun that would be, I would absolutely love it. I actually feel more called to Tampa, just because that is where I grew up, and it would be great to be there.
There are churches in Celebration constantly looking.
That's true. That's true. Tampa Bay area for sure. Frank and I have chatted a little bit about this, and some of the locations Frank has sent to me are pretty much in line with where I've been thinking as well. But I don't want to get too close-minded, because we also recently started sort of a partnership with a few area churches. We're calling it the Collective, and I was very vocal at our first meeting with the Collective that, hey, we are going to be bringing on a planting pastor, and if you guys have ideas to where there's a pretty good need for a gospel-centered Bible preaching church, I'm open. And Frank, I mean, I've already heard from one of those pastors who literally told me, I've got a location, we just need a pastor. So like those things could happen, still all in the greater Tampa Bay area. But how cool would it be if Lakeview partnered with Safety Harbor, who also partnered with Faith, who also partnered with Live Oaks, and we all sent you out together, Frank? So there's a lot of possibilities here. I'm really excited about it.
Frank, I've got a question for you. So this time last year, you were hosting and publishing a podcast called What is a Campus Pastor? You can probably still go to whatisacampuspastor.com if you don't know what I'm talking about. Have you changed kind of your view on church models or the best way to saturate a specific city? Or is this just a different type of model for you?
It's a good question. I will say, when I did that podcast and going on sabbatical, I did get a clear picture of what a campus pastor is. And I would say that somewhat colored the reason why I'm here where I am right now. I'll explain that in a second. But you asked like, have I like changed my view or of model churches? When I interviewed at Tim's church, I sensed something very quickly that I talked to Tim about. There was like a little bit of anxiety, I think, from the staff about me as a person that's at a multi-site church coming to Lakeview, and like and they probably wouldn't say this, but almost I sense like they were nervous that I would come and try to import all these ideas of a multi-site mega church into Lakeview, and they were like resisting that. And so I started asking Tim, like, is there like bitterness towards maybe other local bigger churches in the area or multi-site churches? And that's not we don't need to talk about that specifically here, but one thing I said to them was that the difference between a large multi-site mega church and a smaller local church is, at the end of the day, resources. It's just money. Like it's money and like opportunities to do stuff. Because you can find whack multi-site mega churches in the same way you can find whack 200-person churches. You can find bad theology in both. You can find misappropriate funds in both, bad leaders in both. That's the biggest difference. I do think larger churches may draw leaders that might have some ulterior motives because of the ambitiousness that is required in larger churches, but I don't think it's necessary. I think at the end of the day, like, if you have a good elder board, a real elder board that's going to keep the leader accountable, then like whether it's a 5,000 person church or a 500 person church, that church should be in good care and should be safe. So ultimately, I found when I did that, What is a Campus Pastor podcast, and my sabbatical where I met with a lot of churches, is that most multi-site churches, and that includes the multi-site that my church sits in, is a model that requires a campus pastor to sit in a form of middle management, if you will. And you have to like be okay where you are highly shepherding. So this is like, if you really want to just shepherd people and just love people and do funerals and baptisms and weddings and be in the life with people, man, there's like no better position than a campus pastor, because you don't have to worry about the weight of responsibility of the administrative side of things at the church, nor do you have to worry about the weekly process of writing a sermon. And so I'm trying to make sure you hear me say this in a way that's not disparaging to multi-sites, because I think that's the beautiful picture of a multi-site, is what a campus pastor can do is honestly what you three cannot do, is give 90% of your time to people and less time to the administrative side and the preaching side. So that's when a multi-site works perfectly, that's the beauty of a campus pastor. The shadow side of that is this: a lot of multi-site churches, and this is not true about Epicos, because I think we are above the average now, but the shadow side of all this is that a lot of multi-site churches, they run slim on their economics in terms of their budget. So therefore, they're hiring people who are younger and that they can afford, right? Like people who are like late 20s, early 30s, early in their career. And so they're kind of like naive into like who they want to be and what they want to do in ministry. And so therefore you see a lot of turnover in multi-site churches because they're hiring young and they can't maintain them. That's not necessarily the thing. The issue, not the issue, that's the wrong word to say. The thing I found here is that in a campus pastor role, if you have what I would call holy ambition, and what I mean by holy ambition is like a desire to be the driver when it comes to the direction of the church, the direction of its theology and its vision, you're going to feel like you're pigeonholed as a campus pastor. Does that make sense? Like you are submitting, as a campus pastor, you're submitting to the vision of the lead pastor or the executive team. You can have a sandbox of vision for your campus, but if you have a greater view, a greater desire for something outside of that, you're going to feel like you're being hamstrung. And that's when campus pastors start getting angry at their main church and splitting off and planting churches. And that's when, not planting churches, but starting a church because of a church split, and that's when it gets really messy. What I found is that I've been given this unique opportunity at Epicos to be in spaces that are far above my pay rate, when we had a lead pastor transition, I got to sit in a place where I got to be a part of conversations that campus pastors wouldn't normally have. I've been able to preach, which is not common for a lot of campus pastors, and set a lot of doctrinal things. Every like 3 times a year, I would teach the theology and doctrine of our church in our membership classes. So I have had the unique privilege and honor to sit not in a normal seat as a campus pastor, but in the midst of all that, it has revealed to me that I have this desire to be one of the drivers when it comes to what the Lord is doing for a local body, for a local assembly. And so with that being said, it's not that I think multi-site is a bad model or a wrong model. Like Tim said earlier, it's a model. And I think that model has its unique complexities that you have to think about and deal with. Sometimes in multi-site churches, you're spending a lot of time thinking about the model and making sure that system is functioning well more than you're actually doing ministry. But like that often is the issue when you're like still transitioning into a multi-site and becoming a healthy multi-site. And I feel like there's conversations, and Epicos knows this. Like this isn't like news to them. It's like there's been conversations where it's like, man, we just spent an hour on a conversation about how to make this thing work in our multi-site system. That in you guys' church, you can just say we're going to do this, and this could have been an email, not a meeting type of thing, you know. And so I don't think the model is wrong. I hope I never become one of those embittered people that's like, oh, the big multi-site mega church down the street. Like I pray that because I've had this time in this church, that when I plant this church, whatever larger churches are in the area, I can sympathize and empathize with them and be able to work alongside what we're doing together. And I don't see them as a threat, and they don't see me as a threat, because I know what they're doing and I know what we're doing. And according to the Bible, hopefully we're doing the same thing, trying to make disciples, right? But yeah, I do think personally, my desire is the same as Tim. Whatever this church is going to be that we're going to plant, I want it to be faithful to what it is. And at this current moment, I don't ever see it to be a multi-site church, but a church that plants other churches. So I think that's my answer. Hopefully I answered that correctly or clearly. What else?
I guess for me, a question, you kind of already answered this, but it'd be interesting to hear both of you talk about kind of where you see yourself in 5 years. What's it going to look like 5 years down the road? Because I know when I came here, I had some very specific ideas about where we would be in 5 years. Now, part of that didn't happen because COVID happened and basically like give us a 2.5 year reset button. But there are some things that I thought would definitely be happening that are not happening, and other things that I thought that's not really going to be something that we're going to do that we're doing. So those two examples would be missional communities. I really thought missional communities was going to be where it would be at. And that just really hasn't worked here in the way that I thought it would work. Now we still have a small group, but it's not quite, in the vein of the things I was reading at the time when I thought that was kind of the way to go. And then really, I just kind of, I don't want to say I poo-pooed, but, I kind of really didn't think highly of sort of formalized lecture-based kind of classes for a church. And on Thursday night, we're about to start a class on Romans with a seminary professor, and it's going to be really good, and I'm excited about it. And so I'm just wondering 5 years from now, kind of where do you see yourself being, and maybe even get down to some specifics of like what kind of programs or not programs, things like that, do you see from your end, Frank? And then Tim, kind of where you hope the relationship is in 5 years and what that even looks like down the road.
I hope, even though the churches I've been a part of have never really done the full orange mindset, I thoroughly believe in the orange mindset of like kids and families being like and the church becoming a thing that supports the next generation. I'm really hoping like the Lord will bless this church with a worship leader that I can trust, so I can invest in a great kids and youth person and like really develop a vibrant student ministry and kids ministry that people not only get excited about, but where no one thinks this is childcare, that this is a place where we are discipling young souls for Christ. And it's just something I get excited to think about, and I get excited about the idea of like possibly having a youth person or a kids person that I can like help work with to reach the community and do things with families and things like that. I mean, as far as like my hope in 5 years, if all things run the way they go, that might mean that the church might be maybe 3 years old at that time, maybe 2 or 3. I'm hoping that maybe we're already in the beginning talks, if not already have started talking about planting the next church, and like working with Tim and Andrew and the other local churches that we've had in this network. I'm hoping that we can already just begin this rhythm that we're seeing multiple churches being planted throughout the greater Tampa Bay area. I'm hoping that we can see some like beautiful synergy between the churches where like I always think back to that day where Tim is wearing another church's t-shirt on his pulpit when he's preaching. And like, I'm just praying that like, that's such a common thing that like, we're all like rooting for each other to grow. And like through that, it just changes the landscape of Tampa where it's not so much like tribal, I go to this church or I go to that church, but it's like there's enough people in Tampa who aren't going to a church at all. And therefore, let's all have this mission of reaching those people for Christ. Anyways, I have a lot of like ambitious desires. I do think like being so close to to Jeff and I's alma mater, that I would love to like somehow use that as a pathway to like develop the next generation of pastors in a more meaningful way, and then use my church as a way for like them to intern at and things like that. Like I don't know, I have these ambitious ideas in those regards, but I don't know. Like you said, Jeff, like I want to be open-handed with all that stuff because I want the church to be the Lord's church and not what Andrew thinks the domain is, frankschurch.com. You know what I'm saying? Like I want it to be the Lord's church.
But do you have any t-shirt designs yet, like in your brain? What are you thinking?
All I say is this: if I went to Bridgetown Church in Portland, and their aesthetics are so cool. It's like it's the coolest place ever. Like I want the black and white with this very minimal. I don't know. Anyways,
we still have the outline of your face that I made. We can just use that.
Yeah, that's not narcissistic.
I want royalties though.
Yeah, we gotta get that.
Jeff, I think the 5-year question is so good. It's timely for me because yesterday was my 5-year anniversary of becoming lead pastor at Lakeview Church, which is pretty cool. So thinking back on these last 5 years, I remember thinking, man, if we could get to close to 300 people and become just somewhat stable financially, because 5 years ago we were in a rough spot, man. Like we were really hurting. We lost a lot of people. We were going through a difficult transition, really difficult season. So honestly, what God has done in 5 years at Lakeview, I did not see coming at all. So I don't know what to expect the next 5 years. I do know that I would love to be well on our way, if not already planting the second church for sure. That would make sense with the current timeline because part of Frank's role as we send him out is also going to be to help me find his replacement for the next one. So Frank and I haven't talked about that a lot yet, but Frank is actually going to help Lakeview find another Frank when Frank gets sent out. So that's going to be part of our model to continue to replicate where we multiply and continually send out pastors and plant churches. So that's part of it. You'll hear this conversation in a couple of weeks, but Frank and I recently sat down with a church planting organization. I asked them a few questions that my elders had submitted, and one of them was, we do have a very significant need for space right now. So do we build or do we plant? And the answer was a resounding yes. You do both simultaneously. So that's going to be the plan. We've already been in talks with some architects to what a build could look like. I'll just be honest with you guys. 3 services is probably not sustainable for me. I'm having a ministry fatigue that I've just kind of never had in my life before. And I think a lot of it's related to 3 services each and every Sunday. And I know some guys do 5, 6, and that's just how they're built. That's just not, I don't think that's how I'm built. I'd love to get back down to 2 services if at all possible. But we also have a great need for kids ministry and student ministry space. So what does that look like? Well, hopefully within 5 years, not only will we have that solved, we'll also have that space being utilized, like Frank said, so we can be that space for families where we can truly partner with our families, because part of our, I should say, a major part of our growth at Lakeview is young families right now. So we want to be able to serve them well. So we know that space is a big need if we're going to serve these families well. So that's part of the 5-year plan for sure.
Andrew, should we do like a speed lightning round of controversial topics?
Yes.
Okay.
Tim, how many other resumes did you look at?
That's not what I meant, but okay.
There were a few who reached out, and what I told my elders was similar to the process I went through. Was, can we put Frank through this process? And if we all come back and say, you know what, we'd like to continue the search, then let's do that. So that's what we did. And similar to the way I was interviewed at Lakeview, I was the only quote unquote resume up front. But we all knew that if the search team said, let's keep looking, then that was going to be the direction. But it was pretty immediate after not just getting Frank's resume, but having our elders sit down with Frank and talk with Frank, and then bringing Frank and Corey into Lakeview. That this wasn't just, it's Tim's
You don't
friend.
understand how speed round works. Frank, how many resumes have you sent out over the past 2 years?
Tag nabbit.
Just one.
Frank, elders or deacons?
Both.
Okay. Pedo baptism, credo baptism.
Credo
Nice.
baptism.
Frank, are you going to have green rooms?
I don't know what the
That's not a hard no. You guys heard it here.
Wow.
Mega church
Wow.
guy.
Green room for the
You
band
can
at
take Frank out of the
frankchurch.com.
mega church, but you can't take the mega church out of Frank. Needs a green room. Wow.
Have you chosen a coffee vendor for your
Ooh, nice.
up and coming megachurch, Frank?
What's that one that the guy from Under Oath is?
Yeah, that one. I know what you meant. I got the
I
shirt.
want that place.
Yeah.
Whatever
Yes.
it's called.
Same.
Nice.
It's like Seminole, like that's like far away. But anyways,
Yeah.
So is this church going to be hard Calvinist or Arminian? Go.
leans right.
You know where we're going to lean. You know where we're
Yeah, yeah. I will say this. On the first question you guys asked Tim. Tim did kind of put a little bit of pressure on me, because Tim's right that we've been talking about this for years, and he's asked me before, like, dude, come to Florida, and I was like, nah, not right now. But when he asked me earlier this year, I remember he like texted me. He's like, Frank, I would love to talk to you on the phone, and like that's not completely abnormal, but I was like, this is going to be a different kind of conversation. And Tim was like, Frank, I just met with our elders. This is what we want to do. I would love for it to be you, but if it's not you, we will start looking for someone. So this is like, he kind of gave me an ultimatum. Like, we're not going to be flirting around anymore. We're going to move ahead with this. So you need to make a decision right now where you're going to
Preach or get out of the pulpit.
There's a good one, Jeff. Wow.
That's the pastor's way to say. That's the pastor's way to say the other phrase.
Frank, do you remember it was maybe March, January, or sometime in the winter of last year? Jeff was down with his family, and Jeff, Tim, and I were having coffee, and we FaceTimed you and asked when you were going to move to Florida.
Yes.
Yeah, I do
And you were
remember
like, guys, let me call you guys
was
back
like,
when I'm not in my office.
Right after 2 devastating hurricanes, I'll be there.
Right when the property values are at an all-time low.
That's really funny. All I have to say is like
Hymns
this
or
is what I'm
band?
saying. Oh, I want both. I want like Ascend to Hill vibes.
Well done.
I want both. Yeah.
Without the apostasy. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. but yeah, like guys, I'm really excited. This is a tremendous opportunity, and even outside of what this opportunity means for Lakeview and Tim and myself, and just like the friendships that we have here, this is going to be something awesome for the podcast. There will be like things that are going to happen for like the podcast in terms of like us doing more creative things. The conference can have more time to be able to be thought about and do more exciting things with that.
Delmar and I getting left out of decisions. It's going to be great. Can't wait.
Now, all this means is that we're trying to convince Jeff and Delmar to find a reason to come down to Florida more. And yeah, I mean, even on the morning after ministry show, I listened to the episode this morning, and they were talking about, bringing in another camera angle so that way I could sit on the couch with you guys. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff happening with this move and this transition. With that being said, over the next several weeks. Next week in particular, we're going to have an episode where me and Tim are going to sit down with this church planting organization that we've been talking about. And that organization is Converge. We're going to be sitting out with two men who are kind of high up in the church planting of Converge organization. And basically, it serves as twofold. We ask a lot of questions that you might be interested to know about when it comes to being a church that wants to plant a church. But also, it's literally me and Tim asking all the questions that we didn't know. And we're like, how do we do this? What do we should do? How should we? And like, they gave us a good conversation. And through that, me and Tim have gained some like good friendships and ministry partners in this, that now me and Tim are going to be flying to Arizona for a conference. And
Bro, they just sent me a free ticket to the conference. I'm like, let's go. That was sweet.
They're pretty awesome. Yeah.
I have one more lightning round question.
What's up?
Do I need to be worried?
While you were gone, he did mention Safety Harbor in Clearwater. So.
Well, I had my AirPods on. I'm just saying, do I need to be worried? Because Tim and I have had this thing going for a while. Frank, I've known you longer than Tim has. Remember the chocolate gravy that we had at that cafe in Toadsuck Square in Conway, Arkansas?
The real question here is who's going to get more time with Andrew? You know what I'm saying?
We need to clarify.
That's a restaurant, people.
That's a restaurant. We need to clarify. Also,
is it even called that anymore?
This is why we have 3% ladies listening to this podcast.
Yes, exactly.
3%. Andrew, I can't speak for Tim, but I want to be
not yet.
In addition, I want to be in addition to, not a replacement of. Because I want our friendship to grow as well.
That was very campus pastory, dude. That was smooth. That was so smooth.
Andrew, watch out, Jeff. Frank's coming. So that's all I'm going to say. You just better watch yourself.
Freudian slip.
I'm in trouble.
Or Jeff.
I'm in trouble. I feel like I'm being replaced. And hey, if you are looking for a new best friend, 727-643-1946, hit your boy up. Apparently, I've got a lot more free time. And
in November. You got till November. It's fine.
That's 2 weeks away, Jeff.
Well, two more?
2 weeks
Two more
away.
Applebee's. 2 more trips to the B.
Andrew is going on sabbatical for a while, so that's just me and Tim alone time.
The timing is not lining up.
Dude,
it's not good.
This is the equivalent of you coming back and being fired. Like,
that's exactly what this is.
He's going to come back and be like, hey, you know what? We're going to do the podcast just like the other 4 of us. It's cool.
Wow.
All right, next week we have an interview with the guys from Converge. It's really good. Even if you're not even thinking about planting, I want to encourage you. This is like a very good episode to listen to. And if you are thinking of, like, if your church is thinking about planting, or if you individually want to enter into the world of church planting, listen to this episode. They have their own podcast. I'll talk about that in the show next week. And after that, show us grace, because I'll be traveling and moving. Andrew is going on sabbatical. Things are shifting and moving, but we'll do our best to kind of keep our weekly schedule as best as we can. But I'm excited for what this means for personally for me, and what this means for Tim and his church, but greater what this means for the podcast and this crew who has been doing this show. Guys, we've been doing this show for a while. You know that? Like quite a few years. So
we've been doing this show for longer than a lot of youth pastors have been at their current church. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
True.
There are youth pastors that started listening to this show the week they started, and they are now in senior management in their insurance practice. So we've been doing this for a while.
There's pastors who started listening to this podcast who are now doing great in their real estate job because they got fired. And so anyways, these jokes are not good. I'm going to edit this out. Anyways,
definitely don't.
Guys,
keep it, because it's true.
I appreciate you guys. If you before we go, I do have a book recommendation for our book recommendation of the week. I've been just diving deep into church planting books and books about like church as a whole. Obviously, one thing that I've been loving is Everything by 9 Marks. And one thing a friend of mine told me, who is actually in a part of a 9 Marks church.
Well, that answers a bunch of my questions from before.
No, Jeff. Let me finish my last.
Apparently, they will not be having more than one service.
No,
women.
No.
Here we go.
No. Let me say this last part. A friend of mine who is a part of a 9 Marks church said, You can love and appreciate what 9 Marks does without being a 9 Marxist. And that was a great line. I thought that was really good. And so I've been like reading these 9 Marks books, taking them for what they are, the beauty and the simplicity of what they're trying to convey for the church. And I understand that I actually don't agree with the one service only mindset, thinking that 2 services is 2 congregations. Anyways, if you don't know anything about that, you can read about that in 9 Marks. But with that being said, there's a book that I want to recommend for people who are interested in planting or churches who are interested in planting churches from their church. It's called Planting by Pastoring by Nathan Knight. It was a great book that I've read in regards to church planting, and one emphasis that I got from it that Tim and I are doing is planting from a local church, not just a parachurch organization, because it's really easy to just subscribe to a list of doctrinal statements and then being sent out with a load of cash to plant a church. But it's a whole other conversation to actually be doing life with another pastor in a local church community. And then after you plant, being able to have them still there to hold you accountable and to support you in the flesh as opposed to from a distance. And that in that book, like kind of illuminated something in me that was like, I'm glad that we're doing it this way, as opposed to what we hear so many planters do, which is their own thing of they just parachute into a city and raise a team away from a local sending church. So anyways, check out Planting by Pastoring by Nathan Knight. The link is in the show notes.
What's that other link that you have down in there?
No, I don't know what this. There's a link that's been added to this doc that I am not going to read. But with that being said, we hope you check out the Project Pastoring Conference, projectpastoringconference.com. We hope to see you there. And yeah,
I am not clicking on that.
Next week, I will.
It's an Amazon link.
That.
You should click it.
It's a children's book, and it's not worth reading. All right. With that being said, I'm Frank Gill.
I'm Jeff Simpson.
I'm Andrew Larson.
And I'm Timothy Miller.
See you next week. Bye.
Everybody poops.